Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
I am so happy for this opportunity, Lupi. Really, thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah. So I like to start every interview by asking guests, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, I wanted to be an actress,
Ah.
but not a glamorous actress. What I actually wanted to do was be part of a theater company. I was in love with
Ah.
the theater. And then I got to see Broadway and I would see all the plays. Cats came to Mexico and there was Silvia Pinal singing the main role, like Grisabella, the cat that dies. And I was like, God, I want to be able to make people feel what
Mm,
Silvia Pinal singing that song,
mm,
Memory, made me feel. So
mm.
that
That's
was a path I wanted
beautiful.
to pursue.
Well, tell me, how do you think that connects to your work today?
It's part of everything because I think that the only constant throughout my career and my being has been creativity.
Mm,
And acting is so much about creating these
mm,
different personas inside your mind. And
yeah.
so even though I've worked in fashion, I've worked in marketing, even when I was working at an advertising agency, and it was all about connecting to feelings because that's what you do when
Mm,
you try to sell things to people. And then
mm.
I got super disappointed about that because the last thing that I wanted was to sell more stuff to people.
Mm,
But I already had this language
yeah.
into understanding how to build those connections. And then I became the voice of different brands on social media. And I didn't want to build my own social media, but I
Mm.
was the voice for Volkswagen Canada when I was living there. And I
Ha-
saw the power of that.
And how did that happen? How did you become the voice to it? I'm just curious.
Well, it was just, I was working at this advertising agency. I was working at DDB, and they had this division that was in charge of all the digital assets for Volkswagen Canada. At that time, I opened their Instagram account. They
Oh,
didn't have one. I
wow.
literally, I did the
Created the handle.
VW Canada because we were scared that someone was going to take it away. So I went through all that process, and it was very random. And it was just because I had been working in advertising for so long. But then that was my baby, and it was writing all the posts and getting all these approvals because people were so scared of social media at that time. But it taught me a lot about how people can relate to a voice, to a brand, and
Mm,
just to something that where you make them feel something just because there's this sense of community and
mm,
belonging and shared experience,
mm.
which is what makes brands be as special and as close to the hearts of people as they are.
Yes. Well, for those who don't know, could you tell us what you do today? Tell us about the work that you do today.
Right now, the thing is, after going through all these paths that I've
Yeah.
sort of introduced already, I understood that there's nothing more important than the experience of belonging. And belonging can only happen from a very deep place of connection to
Mm,
people and to your own purpose in life. So, through the power of intention, which is something that I learned after being part of an incredible project called the Women's Forum for Economy and Society that took place in France back in 2018, I learned that women connected were the most powerful
mm,
source. And once I made that discovery, there was this invisible thread that started leading to all these experiences that just showed me connections to a deeper and a deeper and a deeper level. And I understood that the only thing that we're missing right now to make sense of our lives personally and to make sense of our lives collectively, which is the most important, is
mm,
to see that invisible thread. So the braid that I wear, the performances that I do, which is all about braiding women together, all of these things, which are my cathartic and my creative and artistic explosion, they are all about trying to bring that to the face of people because I believe that that's the only piece of hope that we have left. Because the world that we live in, all that it's trying to do is pull us apart through
mm.
social media, through making us digital beings, through all of this.
Yeah.
It's just creating this notion of other, where we actually have to go. And it's something that I learned because of my experience as a child, is we need to go back to nature and back to our roots.
Mm,
And mostly to the way that even up to today, indigenous communities live across the world, because they still have this connection, this notion of each other. They
mm,
still believe in this sense of community, in taking decisions that are for the best of their community, not for the self. And all that, the best expression is a braid. And braids have followed me since I was very, very young. So instead of trying to think that it was just a coincidence, I understood that it was a synchronicity and that it was something that was trying to show me a path that the more you follow, the clearer it becomes. And we all have that as human beings. but we often distract ourselves.
Yeah, and I hear your passion for it. As you're talking, your voice becomes stronger. You're talking with a lot of power and intention. I hear
Thank you.
that deep belief in it. My top value is connection. So as you're talking, I'm thinking, yes, connection is so powerful.
And it's a braid. Like, if you have a hair in your hands, you can break it in the simplest of ways. But when you have a full braid, how do you break that? You need scissors. You can't, like it's the power of a
Stronger.
collective.
And when did you, so for those who are not watching this on video or listening, Danié is wearing a beautiful braid on her hair. And when I first learned about you, I read about you on D Magazine, a local magazine here in Dallas. You'd braided Olivia's hair from Molino Oloyo.
Yes.
Really cool. And when she was on the podcast recently. So I thought it was really cool. And seeing a picture of you, it's just like, I remember your style and confidence. And it struck me how you're beautiful and you carry yourself in a way that was just really special. And I think it was in that article where maybe Olivia was talking about it, where you did her hair and then she said she felt like she was wearing a crown. I think it was her who said this. And so how did that come about? When did you start braiding your hair the way you do? I know you said it's kind of been a part of your life always. Was there a moment that you made that connection that you then intentionally started doing it, or how did it all start?
It all started because my first memory of a braid is my grandmother. My grandmother used to have this braid that she kept in this beautiful like velvet box. And every time I went to her house, she was like, look, this is my braid. And she had basically cut her hair after she got married as a promise to sort of give herself only to her husband. Or I still don't understand. I wish I could ask her. But right when she got married, she cut her hair and she never let it grow again. She always had it short ever since that day. And so she always kept this braid, and that was like her big memory. In time, I didn't grow up with my mother. I had this indigenous nanny from the Amecameca. It's this little town that is right under the Popocatépetl in Mexico. And she would always braid my hair whenever I had a special occasion. She would wake up early and do a braid. And then I would feel it became like a shield. The braids that I wore became like this element that brought me back to femininity, which is obviously something I can understand right now. But at that point, it was just feeling that someone cared. And as I didn't have the feminine present in the motherly figure, that meant everything to me. Time went by. I continued to braid my hair. Then my grandmother died. And when she died, something happened that I just wanted to braid my hair more often. And I felt that I was connecting to her through that, because she never saw me have my hair that long. I always had my hair short growing up, and she was always telling me to have it long. And now I mean, I don't cut my hair. I haven't cut my hair in 4 years. So my hair is like longer than my butt. It's really long. And the act of braiding sort of brought me back to her. I didn't understand why at that point, but now I've come to realize that hair is an extension of our souls. And this is something that every indigenous group understands. We just forgot. Like cutting our hair is a symbol of being conquered by others. It's a symbol of colonization across cultures. That's something that unites.
Interesting.
I'm doing a huge investigation on braiding because I'm doing different art projects that involve hair. And it's incredible, especially when you see how it relates to how it's perceived right now. But anyway, I was told to be a part of this project, the Women's Forum for Economy and Society, where I was asked to put together the top 50 women in Mexico and take them to France, to Deauville, to represent our country as the invited delegation of that year. And this was incredible because, I mean, the head of our delegation was Salma Hayek. There was Christine Lagarde. And that event and that experience exposed me at a moment of my life where I felt totally defeated by motherhood to this incredible network of women that believed in each other and that leaned into each other in a totally different way than I had ever seen. Because in Latin America overall, we grow with a soap opera dilemma. After watching all those telenovelas, our minds go to a very dark place when it comes to other women. And I've lived in enough countries to be able to say this. I've lived in Spain, I lived in Stockholm, I lived in New York, I lived in Dallas, I lived in Miami, but the whole thing is we don't understand the other as an ally. We always see it as, like, an enemy. And that's telenovelas, sorry. The end. That was Televisa, telenovelas. So this group of women exposed me to something totally different. And the last day of the program, they asked me to braid their hair the way that I had it, which is exactly the same braid that you see right now, which is a crown braid, but without the textile. At that time, I wasn't using the textile. And the experience of braiding them was so transformative. Have you braided another woman's hair? Adult woman?
No, never.
It's incredible.
Hmm.
You connect so deeply. For me, it was an energetical current that I just couldn't explain. This sense of understanding that you're not separate from the other. And I was like, oh, really? But at that time, you're kind of reluctant and you're like, no, it's in my mind. No. But I wanted to explore further. And so the person that I worked for when I was doing this project gave me the Hermes Carré, the really big scarf, as a gift, as a thank you gift for the work I had done in putting together this group of women. And I decided to braid it into my hair and to turn it into a daily reminder of having to do one thing every single day for someone else outside of my nucleic family and not expecting anything in return. So when it was something else, at that point, I was working for Condé Nast. I was writing for Glamour back in Miami for the Mexican and Latin American edition. And I had a lot of opportunities to obviously bring about light to all these designers and influencers and just key characters from Miami at that time. And so I loved how easy it was. But then even when I left Condé Nast, I continued doing it. So the process is I first let go from my hair, then I braid the things that I need for my day. And then I think of this one intention, of this one thing that I will do for another woman to help her out on her path. Mostly it's introductions, because that's a life-changing thing always when done properly. And then it's sealed in the knot. It's always written here. So I have all my written intentions in a little box. And then the way that you change the energy around you is impossible to describe, because you start living your day not only for yourself. And that's something that we don't do. We usually live for ourselves, for our little, for the things that you need, for your interests. But when you open your mind to where others are and just give, it's a very interesting experience, because you realize that it's never going to be the person that you're helping that is going to give you something back. That's why the main premise is not expecting anything. But you see how the world starts just shifting and opening you beautiful opportunities, like the one for Dallas Magazine, which came because of this friend of mine, Christy Ramirez, who I braided 5 years ago at Frida's house at La Casa Azul in Mexico City. And suddenly I come to Dallas and she lives here and she starts opening all these beautiful opportunities to me, which doesn't make any sense. But it all starts from this moment of selflessly doing something to help someone and bring about the piece of light into their lives, because God, we all need a little bit of that.
Oh, I'm so inspired right now. Why,
I've lived life that way.
Yeah.
It's been 7 years of braiding intentions almost on a daily basis.
Well, and I see evidence of that even in you accepting this invitation and wanting to share your story and accepting my invitation. Someone who I messaged you on Instagram and I said, would you like to be on the podcast? And you were open to it. So I see that generosity of just helping other women.
The thing is that I think that the more we share that message and we bring about light into that, because everyone talks about entrepreneurship and all the things that you need to do, power woman and But no, our power is just understanding that we have each other.
Well, Danié, if someone's listening and there's a woman listening right now, or even a man who's listening and thinking, wow, I'm really inspired by what you're saying. I believe that connection is so powerful. I want to get started. I want to connect more. What would you recommend? What do you say to that person? How can you get started if they're feeling like, what I've seen in client conversations as a coach is that a lot of people are feeling isolated. A lot of people, because of the pandemic, haven't really reconnected back into their community. What would you say to that person listening?
I think the most important is to understand where your sense of purpose is. And that's a question that we often not ask ourselves. And that's the root of how everything in our lives sort of unfolds. So once you figure out what your purpose is, understand what can be this one thing you can do that you wish someone else had done for you. I think that's the way to start it. And because
the purpose question can be so big.
Yeah, the purpose question is huge and it's not easy to answer. But at least you know what are, like, for example, for you is seeing other people grow. That's probably part of your purpose.
Yeah. And feeling fulfilled in their work. That brings,
exactly.
If I help someone do that, that is amazing.
Exactly.
I'm struggling to find the word, but that would mean so much to me if I inspired someone to find work that they loved and gave them purpose and fulfillment.
And that's the thing. So everyone has a brief idea, and it often comes to what you asked as your first question, like something that you did when you were little, or it's always in your most vulnerable, layered self where you can find it. I mean, I've been hiding on the corporate world for all this time. It's only now that I can take a stride and just go deep into the creative world. That has been a huge process for me. So a lot of people can be just in this world that is not what they wanted for themselves, but is what they believed was their path. So once you have that clear, and then for me, I understood that one of the biggest challenges that life has put for me was the feminine. The feminine has been recurrently this thing where there's conflict. There's a lot to be solved since I was little because of not having my mother growing up. Like that left a big scar. And when you see that life keeps throwing that ball at you, then I realize that that's part of the work I need to do. So that's where I have to heal the most. So that's where I have to go deep and give more of myself than I would usually give in order to discover what I haven't learned from that chapter of the continuation of the life path I'm in. Because the most important understanding that is also part of what I try to express through the braid is your passage in this planet, in this earth right now, is just the continuation of your mother, your grandmother, your bisabuela, tatarabuela, you keep going. You're just completing things that they haven't. So what are you completing? What part of your life right now? You can see the reflection of some program, some situation that they didn't complete themselves and that you need to pull through past that level, almost like if it was Mario Bros. Ding, 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 you get the little flag and you pass to the next level. For me, a lot had to do with motherhood and all these raw experiences I went through when it comes to that. So now you pass that level and you continue. But then what is my role? If I've gone through all that process of seeing that invisible thread that unites me with my ancestry, that makes me understand that I will leave open programs for my kids, and that the more conscious I am of which programs I'm leaving open, the better it's going to be for them because they will have it clear. And then from there, focus on all that experience of life to give back to others in the lessons that you've learned the hardest way. And so that's where the power of intention can be very strong. When you're connecting with the biggest scar that you have inside, and that has led you to the deepest work throughout this life experience. So in very simple terms, because I know I went around and around, just think about something that you want in your life. It cannot be something like money or the love of my life, or no, this is about you and your service in this planet. Like, why on earth did universe, God, however you want to call it, put you here? Think of what you think that could be, and then do one thing every day to help others fulfill that area of their lives. And you're going to see yours fulfilled in a very magical way.
And you know what it strikes me, the sense I get from you, Danié, is that you've done a lot of work. There's a lot of awareness. Because what I know from working with a therapist and coaching and growing is that a lot of the times we're not even aware of what needs healing. And so what has been your journey around that? I'm curious. Has it been through, as you become more aware of your hair and the journey of braiding and connection, or has it also included work with a therapist? How have you developed such a deep awareness of what you needed to heal?
The thing is, I had this really heavy experience when I was 6 years old. I saw my grandfather die in front of my eyes. 23rd of December, family, Christmas, doing a picnic on the beach in Cozumel. No worries. No, because you know what? It's what made so many realizations come to me. But it was obviously really, really tough as a child. And I loved him with all my heart. And strangely enough, right now I have a picture of him right there because of the project I'm working on. Ooh. Anyway, synchronicities that are crazy. Anyway, so after he went into the ocean with my father, a wave separated them. He got a heart attack, and then his body was just floating. We couldn't get to it. And there were huge waves. This was in Chenrio, which is an area of Cozumel that is basically a virgin beach. So it was a mess. Finally, they recouped the body with an helicopter. But I was angry at him when he died. And even as a 6-year-old, that was extremely heavy for me because he had been throwing sand at me and I was angry and he died. And there's this picture that my dad took right before he went into the ocean and all of this happened. where there's this red light that goes straight to the clouds, like to heaven, to say it to a certain extent, or to our idea of heaven. It was really interesting, that red light. And that experience changed forever my understanding of things, of feelings, of emotions, of forgiveness, of how I lived my everyday. The next year, my parents got divorced, and it wasn't an easy divorce. It was really heavy. My mother is an artist, and that was also one of the reasons why it took me so long to really lead a creative life, because I saw her path being very complicated, and that she was extremely depressed and not being able to express herself because my father wanted like a strawberry pancake wife, and that's the last thing she was. And so as an observer and being Cancer and feeling so deeply, all of these experiences made me very much aware and made me always look for relationships with older people, older women. My friends, I mean, most of them are at least 10 years older than I am. And my path, it has been mostly through reading, through rituals. The biggest part of me is the connection to rituals. I spend a lot of time alone, and I desperately need my time alone, which has been one of the hardest things about motherhood. And I understood the power of having mirror conversations and programming my mind to the things I wanted, because I tried therapists and it never worked. I could never connect the right way. I never felt it. It was never healing. Yoga was extremely healing for me. It still is today. And writing is extremely healing, because I think that it's so easy to lie to others and to ourselves when you speak. But the only way where you cannot lie to yourself is when you're doing art or when you're looking at yourself in the mirror. And so even the braiding ritual, it's a conversation with myself. When I'm braiding, it's very cathartical, and it's very, when you look at yourself in the eyes, you know exactly what you're doing and what you're not. So if you take that time, instead of just like, la, 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 to have an honest conversation with yourself, that's extremely healing. And when I realized the power of that is when I had my first child, and I had terrible postpartum depression. I was living in Sweden, so I couldn't really relate to the people. Zoom wasn't as evolved at that time, because we're talking about 2011. Just by sending messages to myself, which obviously are techniques that I've read from books or from my grandmother or from shamanism. I find shamanism a beautiful way of understanding life and completing someone's soul, because the main premise, people always think that it's like voodoo. It has nothing to do with that. Shamanism is about taking all the lost pieces of your soul and sewing them back together. And it's through different processes. It's like meditations and conversations and plants and things that have nothing to do with black magic. So all those paths of learning and just the realization of this thread being existent changed everything for me. So again, and this is a big one, because postpartum depression, I mean, a lot of people hear about it, but to say it in very raw terms, I wanted to kill myself and I wanted to kill my child. It was that bad. So once my son almost drowned in the little thing where I was washing him, thank God my husband came in, because I was just watching him, and he could have passed away right that second. That's the moment when I realized that I was just losing it. And it's horrible because you cannot control it. Like you're in another dimension, because hormones and everything is just getting you to a very confusing place. And really, it was just a matter of every day I would sit in the mirror whenever he was napping, and I would be like, I am an incredible mother. I am a wonderful, and all the things that I wanted. I have incredible mental and physical health. I have all these mantras that I kept repeating to myself to tears, because of course I wasn't any of the things I was telling myself I was at that point. But that very raw conversation to myself, looking at myself straight in the mirror and saying these things mantra by mantra, I would repeat them at least 50 times just to convince myself, to hack my mind and get out of the cloud I was living in. And the things that you repeat to yourself, you end up believing that. That's why we shouldn't be singing reggaeton, because it's awful. Horrible mantras to be repeating.
So yeah, I believe our words have a lot of power.
Everything we consume, everything. We're absorbing everything. So if we're watching all that violence, look at the world right now. What do you have on Netflix? Like just people killing people, whatever. Like, of course. What can we expect if that's the reality we are creating through the media that we're consuming?
Yeah. Earlier, you mentioned, Danié, that you left corporate and that you resisted maybe becoming an artist because of that connection, because your mom was an artist and you saw kind of some of the struggles there. How did you eventually decide to leave corporate? Because what you've mentioned from your background, it seems like you had success in that world. How did that happen? There are people listening who want to make pivots and it seems impossible. So,
Yes, and I think that, it's true. It's never easy, especially when I was at the magazine I was working at. It was really tough because it was a wonderful position, but I faced this character. I cannot describe too much who this person is, but the antithesis of everything I believed. And all the things that I'm telling you about women united, and all of the things that I was living and that I took so seriously, she was totally against it. And she didn't, I don't know what it was, but she was just this horrible person to me that made me realize that what I was losing my time trying to continue to fight to be part of this world that was real, because it was just an ego competition. It wasn't even like a specific thing. It was a matter of ego. It wasn't even my direct boss. It was someone else. So I had a great relationship with my boss and with my editor. We're still very good. And it was bungee jumping, because especially working on such a publication gives you a lot of power. It's a huge umbrella. And I had been there for almost 3 years. And at the beginning, when they kept inviting me to things and they kept asking me to do things, I was like, it was all about this realization that I wasn't my work, that I wasn't who I was working for, that it wasn't the business card who made me valuable enough.
Because you were being asked to participate in things even after you left the magazine. They wanted you.
Exactly. Yes. Then I started journey of a Braid, and I started to express myself the way I wanted on social media, because of course before I couldn't. And it opened up more opportunities that I could have ever dreamed of. And then I continued doing a bit of corporate building experiences for a big financial institution. And I stopped doing that recently until like February. But doing that work was still creative work, and it was in line with the things I wanted. And so right now, since February, I've been doing this art residency and pouring myself fully into creative work, which is the first time that I do it this way. And it's very different because also on social media, like you produce things that are consumed easily and then discarded. It's like this blah, blah, blah content that then dies. And when you're trying to fulfill a piece of art, it's so much more work. So I've been working in this particular project for about 4 months, and I have 2 months more before I can actually bring it to life. But showcasing this sense of all the things that I stand for, basically, in a piece that connects people in a totally different way. But it's bungee jumping. It's really hard, and you doubt yourself every 2 seconds. And it's always, I've been privileged enough because my husband is a primary breadwinner as well. But I couldn't imagine going through this process without having that certainty. It's also different. So I understand where other people are.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for sharing that piece, because I think sometimes that people just assume, oh, this person left and maybe they can't see that there is a support system behind that allows the risk to be taken, the support.
Yes. Yes. And I don't know what my life would be like without that, for sure.
Yeah. It enables you to be able to do this, which is great. So thank you for being open about that.
And I continue to do small things, but I couldn't support my kids in school and do all these things without my husband. And that's also something that we need to accept, because otherwise, at the eyes of others, it becomes really frustrating.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about motherhood. You've mentioned it and how it has been this challenge, this thing that you've experienced, as we all have as moms. Being a mom is one of the greatest blessings and also one of the greatest challenges. What has motherhood taught you, and how has it brought you to, I know it sounds like such a canned question, but like, how does it made you who you are today?
The thing is that no one tells you that when you go to the hospital to have a baby, the woman that you were sort of dies. And then another version of you comes out of the hospital. I mean, obviously it's a process. It's not as terrifying as I say it. But you basically die, like that person that you used to be, like the take it easy, everything's okay. A piece of your heart is now outside your body. And then again, through depression and through, even if you only have postpartum depression, but then there's another one.
Yeah, postpartum blues.
Yeah, which is what you always hope you have before knowing that you have postpartum depression. Anyway, it's just really tough. And I think that we women don't make a good job out of talking about it, because it's always like, oh my God, my heart burst and I fell in love. And which perhaps it's the experience of some random women, but oh Lord, I don't understand how it can be. Yes, it's magical to understand that you've created this human being. I mean, I have 2 kids. I love them with all my heart. The first one was really hard, but the second that you have a baby, it's chaos. It's just like, and then you need to and feed them, and you don't have time to go to a restroom, and you totally forget about yourself. I remember telling my husband I need to buy mirrors so I can actually realize that my body is still there somewhere, because I don't see myself. I don't feel myself. Where am I? You disappear. You blur. Of course, it's also a wonderful experience. Absolutely everything and every emotion is balanced. There's the light and there's the dark. But for me, I just came totally unprepared, and not having a relationship with my mother didn't make it easier, because I grew up mostly with my nanny. So even my understanding of what motherhood was totally flawed and out of touch. And my husband took this very particular decision where he was like, no, we're not going to have nannies or babysitters or anything, because that's not my way. My husband is French. And for me being Mexican, and we were living in Sweden. So also it was incredibly expensive to have anyone. When we started interviewing women for that role, I was like, okay, no. Because you have all these wonderfully beautiful Swedish women coming at your house, and you're like, feeling the way I feel. My husband is handsome. Bad idea. So I just did it myself. And my husband was traveling a lot. And I'm very grateful I did it that way, because given my profile and given my personal history, if I had had an opportunity to break free of the responsibility, I would have taken it. And I wouldn't have connected to my kids to the deep level that I have connected with them at this point. And that also gave a lot of opportunity my husband is extremely involved with my kids. That was the one thing that we decided. It was, well, sure, I'm going to do it, but then you're as involved. We do 50-50. I mean, let's say it's a 60-40 because he travels a lot. But when he's here, he's the one. And that's very special. And I'm very grateful for that, because you discover areas of yourself that you had no idea you had. You realize that you will be mirroring the stories of your past, that you will be mirroring the voices of your past. It's just every mirror of every positive and negative characteristic inside of you, just exponentially growing month by month. So you confront yourself. I have my eldest is a mirror of me in an incredible way. So we fight. When we fight, it's like he goes straight to my weakest link, and I do the same for him. And it's my husband is just like, oh, please, you people, like, focus. It's crazy. And of course, as an adult, you need to control yourself. But when you see the things that they come about, and you realize how much those are lessons for your growth, they are just these beautiful beings of light that are there to make you grow in the roughest of ways, though. It's not pretty. Then the youngest is easy. I don't fight with him too much, but I see other areas of me reflected, of the things that I wish I was better at. And so it's just molding these clay creatures with the best of your knowledge on how to turn them into wonderful, giving humans. But it's a very raw process. It's an experience, and it's not for everyone either. Not just because you have a female body, you're supposed to have a child. It's tough. I would do it all over again, but it has been the most challenging position in my life. Like, I remember being with my baby on my own in Sweden, newborn, and he was throwing up, and at the same time he had diarrhea, and I was just like, what hole do I cover? Like, there's no way. Like, and you're just like this, and you're already, like, all dirty. The other one is crying, and you just feel like you're drowning in this place. Or maybe I just had it really tough, and if you have a support system, it might be better. But for me, the first years were truly a daily challenge. They were tough. Let's say the first 2 years of each of them.
Thank you for being so open. I think that's going to be so helpful for women listening.
I hope so.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we talk about it enough.
We don't. We keep it as, oh my God, and you just see the cute Facebook images, and you're like,
yeah. And then now as a mom, I'm like, that must be hard. I see the cute images, and I know that there's a mom who's probably struggling behind it too, because we're all struggling. We're all trying to figure it out as moms. Thank you for sharing that. Well, is there any last thing that you'd like, any last parting thought as we close our interview today? Anything you'd like to share?
I think that it's very important that for everyone that gets to hear this message, just to realize the responsibility that we have upon the world and the systems that we have created, and how late we are already in the game into bringing about change that is going to lead us on the right direction. So the themes of just being conscious about the decisions that we're taking with the environment, the way there's so much that needs to change right now. The planet is shouting. And the basic principle is understanding that we are each other's destiny. And from that understanding, taking daily actions that show that you are not doing things just out of egoism, that you're thinking of the greater good. Like right now, when it's so dry, there's droughts everywhere. Right now in Monterrey, Mexico, there's no water. People cannot buy waters in stores.
Wow.
When I go out here in Texas with whatever degrees we have right now, 40, I mean, I think Celsius, I've never been able to change that.
It's like 100 something in Fahrenheit, yes.
And you see green lawns, that's just wrong. We need to be better. So even in the smallest things, like watering your garden less and understanding that having yellow grass, like I do right now, is a good thing. Let's just separate ourselves from this capitalistic system that is running our lives into this eternal consuming more sort of system, and understanding that what's valuable is something that is way deeper. So spend your time working more on yourself, learning, reading, than just thinking that buying more things is what's gonna cure or heal you in any way. Just look deeper than that, because we really can't take it anymore. And I have that incredibly present because I just came back from Europe, where things are so different. The United States is so lost when it comes to understanding the role it plays in a major scale, and the influence that all this marketing that is bombarding us with stuff for more and more and more and more and more is truly destroying us. Wow. So that would be my message.
Yeah.
And braid with intention. That's the easy one.
Thank you so much. I know this is going to resonate with so many people. Thank you.
Thank you, Lupe.